Please go ahead.
Yes. Good evening. As Sir had briefed, today I will be talking about morality in foreign policy. We will have a very general understanding of what foreign policy is, how morality is placed or should be understood in terms of foreign policy. To start with, it's better to start understanding from, what foreign policy is actually. Let's not focus just on Indian perspective or, one particular state's perspective. This session is going to be completely generic, where we're going to talk about what foreign policy is, what is the role of a leader in shaping a state's foreign policy, how foreign policies fluctuate depending on the changes in leadership, and how morality also changes according to the phase of leadership that a state goes through, or the role of morality, how it has to be perceived in terms of foreign policy. So when we talk about foreign policy, it is basically a state's objective and activities that are taken by a state in order to attain these objectives. A state lists out few objectives on the basis of its ideologies. A state, depending on its historical development, has few ideologies that it develops over years, and on the basis of this, it formulates its foreign policy, or on the basis of its particular needs. So how morality is perceived? Morality is, the decisions that we make and the differentiation that we make on these decisions, on the understanding of what is proper and what is improper. Morality is more to do with character. Morality is more to do with, from a very subjective, very personal, standpoint. So every country has its own ideologies, own morality, and own ethics that is being formulated on various grounds. One being, its history. If you take India, for that matter, India talks about ahimsa. India talks about non-violence, and on the world arena also, India is perceived as a country that is a peace lover, because of the history that we've had, because of the way in which we have attained our independence, and the foreign policy that stands on the basis of these ideologies. If you take the Indian foreign policy, we do give a lot of importance to non-violence and ahimsa. We speak about no first use. We also talk about second strike policy. So we will come in detail to that later. But as of now, when we talk about morality in terms of foreign policy, it is the decisions that we make on the basis of what is proper and what is improper. So at this point, we have to also understand certain, understanding of what is moralistic, legalistic tradition, and how this has been perceived throughout the years. Most of the political thinkers, most of the international relations thinkers argue against the moralistic, legalistic tradition. They focus on, most of the realistic thinkers focus on the fact that a state is anarchic. The international arena is anarchic in nature. And when there is no one single world order, when there is no one single representative in order to maintain peace or order in this particular setup, it is very difficult to maintain a moral standard. So what realists believe is the decisions that we make at that point of time to safeguard a state's national interest, or to safeguard the national power that it has attained, is the most moralistic action that a state can take. So at this point, we need to understand where realism and idealism, stands in terms of morality. In international relations, the most important theories that we need to understand is realism, because realism talks about the nature of a state. It says that state is selfish in nature. Human beings are selfish in nature. We are social and political animals. Today, we are also perceived as economic animals, where We are, seen as people who accumulate wealth. We are known to be, people who crave for power. We want to maintain that power status. And this is how states are also perceived in international relations, where, every state is fighting amongst themselves in order to maintain a balance by attaining power. So here, realism talks about the nature of a state and how national interest has to be safeguarded in order to attain a state its power. And every state has its own foreign policy, which depends on the ideologies or depends on the moral grounds of that particular state. And on the basis of this, a state takes forward its actions or activities to safeguard that power that they have attained or is aiming to attain. So when you talk about moralistic legalist traditions, George Kennan often warns about the negative implications of this particular tradition, focusing on morality or trying to emphasize on good in international relations often can be, negative for a state's survival. What they focus on is the survival of the state. They say that in order to maintain the survival of a state, a leader or the foreign policy should be in such a way that it is strong enough that no other state can take advantage of it. It is also argued that when there is no meaningful choice, there can be no ethics. When, when there is a need that is arising, when a circumstance is such that an action has to be taken, you cannot play by ethics. Realist thinkers support that there is no point in judging a state's foreign policy. We should simply ask whether it is working or it is not working. So this is as simple as we can put it. Realists believe in actions. Realists believe in the practicality. They also believe in what is, and they don't believe in what is ought to be. So when you talk about, morality, when you talk about this, the success of a state's foreign policy or how fair a state's foreign policy is doing, you have to ask whether the foreign policy is working or not. And this is dependent on how far we are able to safeguard a state's national interest, how far the state is maintaining its stability. And it is often, supported by taking actions that are required at that point of time. When you, in recent development, whatever is happening in the world also, when you talk about, wars, take for example, all the American, wars that America has been part of, most of these wars have not been just for accumulation of wealth or for the sake of annexation of territories. They have been for various reasons, including, climate change, including, disputes that are happening somewhere else. But at that point of time, if America has to safeguard its national interest and it has to protect its power, and how it maintains its power is by being a part of these wars. Having said that, does morality not have a place in international relations? Do ethics don't play an important role in international relations? Definitely not. Morality and ethics is a very, very important aspect of international relations or in politics as such. Whether it is local politics, whether it is international politics, morality plays a huge role. But what we are trying to understand today is, how is this morality perceived? Is it perceived in terms of good and bad, or does this trickle down to the mere concept of consequences? What is right at that moment? So Blaise Pascal, says that good thinking is morality. He does not say that, thinking good is morality. You need to think good things. He says that good thinking is what is morality. This is the basic principle of morality. So you have to put your state first. You have to protect your state first. And you need to be able to think in a good way to protect your state. And that is what is morality in foreign policy. At the end of the day, all states try to maintain or protect their national interest. They want to make sure that their national interest is safeguarded, which eventually ensures that they are able to maintain their power. India being a pioneer of non-violence, India being a state that talks so much about non-violence, it also talks about how, we are lovers of peace. That doesn't mean that India has never been a part of any war. We have we have had active part in, wars. We have also, India also has one of the, the second largest standing army in the world. India also talks about, maintenance of power. It also talks about nuclear power. It also talks about deterrence. We do have a very strong, policy of deterrence. We have credible minimum deterrence. A foreign policy should be formulated in such a way that it focuses on how to safeguard the power of that state. And that is what is a moral foreign policy. What is important here to understand is how a state or leaders choose to define and pursue this national interest under different circumstances. We have national interests which we need to maintain, we need to protect in order to attain the power. And what is very, very important is how the state or the leaders choose to attain this national interest in order to maintain that power. We can be brutal, we can be anarchic in nature, we can fight and maintain the power, or we can use other means in order to maintain this power. At the unavoidable situations, when circumstances arises, war is inevitable. But how a country chooses to formulate its national power, how far a country tries to avoid war or violence, is where, a country places its moral ground or ethics in formulating its foreign policy. In order to understand how this morality is perceived over a period of time, we need to understand how international relations thinkers, scholars have perceived morality. So one of the most important thinkers in international relations, one of the most realist thinkers of international relations, Hans Morgenthau, states that state has no right to let its moral disprobation get in the way of successful political survival. He says that morality should not stop a country from choosing its survival. You need to put survival above moral grounds. You need to think about how to survive, how to make sure that my state is safe, rather than thinking what is good and what is bad at that particular moment. Again, I would like to go back and remind you that morality trickles down to choosing or differentiating between proper and improper. But at this point of time, when we talk about international relations, when we talk about balance of power, we cannot sit and choose between what is proper and improper. We have to choose what is proper for our state, what is proper in order to maintain the power of our particular nation. So realism then considers prudence to be the supreme virtue in politics. Prudence, basically means the ability, the emotional intelligence of a particular country. The ability to think right is what is very, very important, in terms of foreign policy. Another, thinker, we often come across as John Mearsheimer. He also states that states operate in a self-help world. It is a well-established statement that the international, arena is in an anarchic state, and we do not have a particular world order. We do not have one particular, leader to point or to maintain an order in this particular, arena. So every state operates in a self-help world in which the best way to survive is to be powerful as possible. So in order to survive, in order for countries to make sure that they are safe, the best way to do that is to make sure that you are powerful. And it is a very common, understanding, on day-to-day politics. Every country, the activities that happen in a country, whether it is on the basis of hard power, whether it is on the basis of soft power, every country is trying to establish its power status, is trying to focus on achieving that power status. So he also says that even if that requires pursuing ruthless policies, he also insists that in order to maintain this power, in order to achieve this power, even if a state has to, pursue ruthless policies, it is not wrong. A state, what is moral for a state to do? What is morality for a state to do in terms of foreign policy is to make sure that it is able to maintain its power. And it is absolutely not wrong for a country, for a state to take up ruthless policies in order to maintain this power. He also insists that, it is not a pretty picture when a state has to, when we talk about, wars, when we talk about, how states behave in terms, in times of, disturbances, it is not a pretty picture, but he says that it is inevitable, it is unavoidable. That is the only way in which a state can maintain its power, and that is the most important thing that a state has to focus on. In situations of survival, consequences may indeed justify what appear to be immoral acts. So this is what is very, very important. Acts or decisions that, we think is immoral or we think is, not right, in that particular consequence, in that particular situation might be the most moral decision to make. So, Robert D. Kaplan also says that the rare individual who have recognized the necessity of violating such morality, acted accordingly, and taken responsibility for their actions are among the most necessary leaders for their countries. What he insists on is the role of a leader in formulating the foreign policy. If you take foreign policies, there is a classic difference between, how a country's foreign policy is perceived on the shift in leadership. The way Barack Obama focused on the US foreign policy is completely different from Trump's perception of US foreign policy. If you take the Indian perspective, Manmohan Singh's foreign policy is very different from how Narendra Modi perceives foreign policy. So the ability of a leader to manipulate, the ability of a leader to influence a country's foreign policy is also very, very important. And what Robert D. Kaplan insists is that a leader who's able to completely do away with, morality, someone who's able to ignore morality in order to safeguard that country's national interest or power is the most important leader for that particular country. So if we have to, understand this in a very deeper perspective, oftentimes, in history, actions are being taken in order to maintain a country's national power, to safeguard a country's national power. When we talk about consequences, the most common example that we can refer to is World War II. Every theory, every action that has taken place in terms of international relations, in terms of world order, the understanding that we have today all trickles down to what happened post World War II. And today, we take reference or we go back to how politics was or international relations was prior to World War and post World War. So when we talk about the role of a leader and the decision that he has to make, depending on the situation, or putting the consequence as the most important thing. In World War II, in 1940, when Winston Churchill decided to mass murder his British fleet, fearing that they might be caught by the Germans or they might be caught by Hitler, was something that is immoral in a human perspective. Mass murdering his own fleet in order to, just so that they do not get into the hands of Hitler, from a common man's perspective, on a moral ground, is perceived to be immoral. But in international relations, the decision that Winston Churchill made is justified on moral grounds, because that was a decision that was made to safeguard that country's national power. So realist emphasizes that a leader should be able to make that decision. He should be able to ignore morality. He should be able to ignore his, individual ideologies, and put the country's well-being and put the state's safety and security as the most important thing. If a leader is going to think about good and bad, if a leader is going to be focusing on, just and what is not just, then safeguarding the country's security or maintaining the country's power becomes a question mark. In recent times, people are focusing more on Machiavelli's, assumption of a great leader. Machiavelli insists that a great leader should be as strong as a lion and as cunning as a fox. And, these are, the ideologies on which foreign policy should be formulated in order to make sure that a country is maintaining its power, it is able to safeguard its power. So at the same time, we saw an example of, where Winston Churchill was, justified, his actions were justified. At the same time, in 1945, when he chose to, bomb Dresden, even though it was in 1945, even though it was already clear that Britain is going to clearly win the war, and his bombing of Dresden was unjustified. It was looked down in the World Forum, and it was condemned, saying that that was not a moral decision to make. So here we can see the classic difference, in how morality is perceived in international relations. Morality is not about, not choosing a violent path. It is about choosing what is right in that particular situation. So, when we come down to what is the alternative, how do we, make decisions? If war is conceived to be immoral, if war is conceived to be unethical, how do we come down? How do we understand, what are the alternatives that we can take in order to protect a country's national power? Coercion is a classic example. Payment of transaction is a classic example. And the most important thing is, most important alternative is soft power. A country can emphasize on its national power, maintain its national interest by developing its soft power, be it education, be it tourism, be it, diplomacy. All of these things, are alternatives in order for a country to make sure that it is able to maintain its national power. So we cannot banish moral discourse from foreign policy. It is, completely impossible for us to banish the concept of morality from foreign policy, but we can try to be more disciplined in how we structure a moral reasoning about it. When we formulate a foreign policy, we need to keep morality as a priority, and we need to make sure that what are the lines that a country will not cross? What are the lines that we draw in order for us to make sure that we are maintaining a moral standard? Negligent assessment and reckless risk-taking leads to immoral consequences. When you formulate a foreign policy, when we are neglecting assessment of what is happening around the world and reckless risk-taking, making decisions without analyzing, without assessment, leads to immoral consequences. So here we focus on the aspect of prudence. Prudence is basically the biggest virtue, emotional intelligence that a country should possess while formulating, a country's foreign policy. So with this understanding, I would like to, focus a slight, we'll focus a little more on how India has perceived its foreign policy throughout the years. India is a, very young country. We are, around 70 years old. And the foreign policy that we have, however, has huge influence from a very, very long history. India focuses on non-violence. We are a country that are pioneers and ambassadors of, peace. However, when we talk about morality, in the world, India is perceived as a country that talks about peace. We are a country that focuses on non-violent means of achieving, national power. Does that mean that India has not attained, nuclear power? Does that mean India is not focusing on its defense strategies? Does that mean India is a country that does not, has not been part of any wars? So how do we justify the moral grounds? How do we justify how India maintains its morality or ethics in terms of foreign policy? That is where we need to analyze how the foreign policy of a country is formulated. So India, of course, developed its national power, nuclear power, but India insisted that we are developing this nuclear power only for the sake of attaining national power. It is in the interest of the country to make sure that India stabilizes itself in geographically in the world arena, and that is the main reason why India developed its nuclear power. However, India also insisted when we developed a foreign policy, India also insisted on non-alignment. We talk about non-alignment, where we say that India will not interfere into the politics or interfere into the sovereignty of another country. At the same time, we will not let another country interfere into the affairs, internal affairs of our country. We will also be pioneers. We will also be a country that focuses on peace and, peace in the neighborhood. So, on one side, India is developing its, nuclear power. And on the other side, India is also saying that we will be non-aligned. We will not take sides. We will not belong to either the Western Bloc or the Eastern Bloc. And that is where, as a country, we are emphasizing on our moral grounds. We are not here. We are not developing a nuclear power to make a stand. We are developing it just to protect our power and our status in the world. At the same time, India also focuses on no first use policy. We did have a successful nuclear testing, one in 1974 and again in 1998. However, India also focused and said that we will not have first use policy. We will have, India has second strike policy. At the same time, we also insist on mutual assured destruction. We also talk about credible minimum deterrence. This is where, again, India places its morality. We say that we are a country that loves peace. We are a non-violent country, because of which we will not use nuclear power. We will not use it to attain power. But if such power is used against us, if it comes to a point where we have to protect ourselves, then India will use this power to protect itself. And also it insists that we will make sure that the destruction is, credible. It is, we will make sure that our deterrence policy is such that you will not be able to strike us back. So that is why India talks about second strike policy. And it says that when we strike back, it is going to have a huge impact. So thus, as a country that is, having a very moral foreign policy, does India say that it is okay if you come and strike us, if you come and hit us with nuclear power, we will not strike you back? No. A country's foreign policy should be formulated in such a way that it protects itself. And India places its morality in such a way that it says that we will not be, first-hand violators. But if we are violated, then we will have to defend ourselves. And that is how morality is perceived in foreign policy. So, it is, when we have to understand how morality works, how ethics works. Idealism talks about what is ought to be, the search for peace, the attainment for peace. Every country is trying to achieve the utopia. Every country is trying, the world is trying to achieve the impossible, but we cannot deny the reality. We cannot deny the fact that anarchy is the state of, it is what is real. And we cannot deny the fact that, nations go through a turmoil of power struggle. We do have, we are in constant static motion, pushing, countries, below or above in order to maintain a balance or an equilibrium in the international arena. So, morality in foreign policy, very simply is, again, I would, quote that morality is good thinking, not thinking good. We can think good, but we need to put the interest of the country or the state prior to what is good or what is bad. If we are going to think about what is good, then that is, it is not something that might assure security or safety for your country. And that is not going to be a concrete foreign policy. So from a humanistic perspective, from a psychological perspective, sometimes foreign policy might be perceived as unethical. Sometimes it might be perceived as immoral. But from a state's perspective, putting the objectives and interest of that particular state, the workings, the successful working of a foreign policy determines the morality of that foreign policy. If a foreign policy is able to successfully protect its state, if a foreign policy is able to successfully make sure that they are able to maintain their power, then that is a very moral foreign policy. At the same time, the fluctuation foreign policy goes through with the changes in leadership. Depending on the change of leadership, foreign policy also fluctuates, because when a leader changes, when a country has a shift in leadership, you need to understand the humanistic perspective that it has with respect to the affairs that is that will take place in a country, the basic activities that takes place in a country. You can see the shift between how foreign policy was perceived. Take for example Manmohan Singh, or now Narendra Modi, or if you go back in history, how foreign policy was perceived by Jawaharlal Nehru. It all has the humanistic influence, their ideologies, where their moral ground stands or their ethics stands. So foreign policy often is also manipulated by the morality and ethics of humanistic touch. But from a realistic perspective, what is very important is for a leader to remove this personal morality or ethics from the welfare of the state. A good leader should be able to put the welfare of the state, the security of the state above his moral or his ethical ground. So having said that, to conclude how morality should be perceived, how morality, plays a very important role in a foreign policy. Prudence, it all trickles down to prudence, the emotional intelligence, what is important in that particular situation, what is wise to do in that particular circumstance. Just like how Winston Churchill chose that, it is extremely crucial to, protect his particular country. And because of that, he chose to kill his own people. That equates to emotional intelligence in foreign policy. The ability to make decisions, the ability to isolate proper and improper and make decisions is what is morality in foreign policy. So if you have any questions.
Yes, Professor, now with your permission, I will open the house for question answer session.
Yes, yes.
And the interns will introduce themselves, put on their video, and ask questions in a simple manner. Yes, come on, be quick. Come on. There's a lot of ground for thinking. So many questions have been raised in the lecture, and you can take up some of them.
अरे दादा मीटिंग में बानी चुप रहा.
Yes.
Good evening, ma'am. First of all, thank you so much for such an insightful lecture. Ma'am, my question is basically related to the fact that if you look back in history, from the time when Hitler the Holocaust, the Holocaust that happened in Germany. Again, Hitler had given a moral justification for his actions at that time. If you look at USA's intervention in a lot of wars during the Cold War, the proxy wars, and in the affairs of different countries, for example, the Vietnam War and the catastrophic effects that it has had. US has given its moral justifications for such actions. And now if you look at the current Ukraine-Russia thing, where Russia is also morally justifying the act that it is conducting. So a question might arise that all these events and many more can actually justify, such moral justification has been used as a tool to justify war or very violent actions. So is it like, this is a thing that I had in mind. So what do you, like, if you can just put in some insights?
Yeah. So oftentimes in, in international relations, these actions are justified on the grounds of, national power. We do not have a choice. When we have to protect ourselves, we do take violent measures to protect ourselves. This is where, we have, international organizations that step in. We have, human rights. We, something that was, developed post 1945, right? We had the United Nations that, focuses on maintaining some order in the world. Whether it is successful or not is secondary. You have to also understand that United Nations does not have any power within the internal affairs of a state. The International Court of Justice cannot punish a state or cannot arrest, a leader or a particular state for their actions. However, they can condemn, they can take other measures to, stop a state from crossing that moral ground. So this is where, when states started justifying, when states started, trying to normalize this on the grounds of maintaining their power or safeguarding their national interest, this is where, we started understanding the importance of an alternate organization that can, protect or maintain an order, where we have, United Nations now, or, post 1945, we focus a lot on human rights. Today, human right violation or, focus on human rights is one of the most important aspects of United Nations, and every country, including India, is focusing a lot on protecting human rights on various grounds, not only international grounds, within the state, within your homes. Okay, so of course, states do justify their actions because, as I said, foreign policy is formulated keeping that state's national interest in mind. It does not focus, or it gives very little focus on an alternate state's national interest. We focus on what is important for us. How do we maintain that power? How do we safeguard our sovereignty? How do we make sure that another state does not interfere into the sovereignty of our state? So when foreign policy is created in such a way, of course, it will have alternate ideologies. It will have alternate implications on another state. So we need to justify it, saying that it is for the protection of our state. It is to safeguard our security. So this is where, international organizations come into play. We can only try to, maintain a civilized world order. I hope I have, given a justifiable answer.
Yes, thank you so much.
Yeah. Any more questions? You can also put it down in the chat box.
Yeah, good evening.
Yes,
I'm
good
Wing
evening.
Commander Amardeep. Yeah, I'm Wing Commander Amardeep. I'm a master student with Defense Studies.
Okay.
I have a question. Where does India stand? And I wanted an opinion. Where does
So your
India
audio
stand
is
on the
lagging.
morality issue in terms of foreign policy? As a response, okay. Am I audible? First of all.
I think 2 audios are on. Yes, sir. Please go ahead.
Okay, I'll repeat the question again.
Yes.
So I wanted an opinion with regards to morality as a response. Where does India see as a response to the foreign policy matters? That in order to avoid a war, we are ready to lose a few lives. So where does human rights or human security come into that? And what do you think is the correct posture in this?
What is the correct?
What is the correct, the proper thing to do when it comes to the issue of morality in IR?
Okay. So when we talk about morality, as I said, morality is not about choosing what is right, what is wrong. It is common knowledge that everyone knows that, to wage war or to kill people is wrong. There is no doubt about that. But when we talk about morality in terms of foreign policy, we focus on the protection and the survival of that state. So if India has to survive, if India has to focus on maintaining its power, if India has to make sure that we are protected at all costs, then if we have to wage a war, then we have to wage a war. So recently also we had so many debates against the surgical strikes that were done. There were so many people who were against it, even political scholars, political thinkers who were against the surgical strikes that happened. But, from, a foreign policy perspective, from a state's perspective, we need to make sure that the security of the state is placed as priority. At the same time, I also emphasized on the role of a leader. How the role of a leader, has implications on how a state takes forward its foreign policy. Again, this surgical strike happened during, Prime Minister Narendra Modi's, tenure. So we cannot assure that, if it was during a different leader's time, whether the surgical strike would have happened. This is where the humanistic morality plays a very important role. How the leader perceives to take that activity, how the leader perceives that how the foreign policy should be taken forward. Maybe if we had to take an action, if we should have taken an action during Manmohan Singh's time, maybe he would have gone for a more diplomatic way of, maybe he would have had a talk with the other country, or he would have tried to come to an understanding through other measures. So when you talk about morality, this foreign policy prioritizes its security. At the same time, depending on the leadership, the moral concept of foreign policy also fluctuates. You can also see a classic difference in, how, Trump perceives US foreign policy, or now Joe Biden perceives US foreign policy, how Barack Obama perceived US foreign policy. Obama being, a person who talks about, peace, who talks about, maintenance of world peace, and how US plays a very important role in world maintenance of world peace, has been a leader who has been part of a lot of war crimes. But they justify it in the name of national power. They justify it in the name of national interest. So the role of a leader also has a huge impact in how morality is pushed into foreign policy. Tomorrow, if the leadership changes, from Indian perspective, if we are to have a different prime minister, then the moral connotation of Indian foreign policy might change. Maybe we might not focus a lot on, the defense strategy. Maybe we might focus a lot on economic grounds. Maybe we might focus a lot on soft power. So the leadership also plays a huge role in how morality is pushed into foreign policy.
Yes, next question. Come on,
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
come on. Next question.
Good evening, ma'am. Thank you for the lecture, first of all. I wanted to ask, based on the last question only, that you talked about security and how prioritization of security sometimes matters before taking moral positions during your moral ethics and policy. Like, how has the prioritization of security over ethical considerations in foreign policy has led to compromised decision making and an over reliance on realpolitik?
So if we have to, okay, I'll give you an example of how, morality has been. We had this Sri Lankan civil war that happened, and the role India played in the Sri Lankan civil war. Okay, so it was a move by then Prime Minister, Indira Gandhi. She decided to send the Indian peacekeeping force to, Sri Lanka.
It was Rajiv Gandhi. It was Rajiv Gandhi.
Yeah, later by Rajiv Gandhi. So, when, we decided to send the Indian peacekeeping force, to Sri Lanka to, help the Sri Lankan government in maintaining peace. However, the Indian peacekeeping force, were a part of a lot of war crimes. Morality was compromised, ethics were compromised, and this had a huge implication in the internal politics of the country. So sometimes, when decisions are made in, in foreign policy, where we make decisions, see, that is where I said, reckless risk taking. We need to understand how this will have an implication in the internal politics. Having, a very close connect, being a Tamil, being a war that is waged against the Tamil population and having a huge Tamil population here in India, the country should understand the, moral grounds or the moral connotation that it will have in its own country. So, to an extent, morality was compromised. India, from the, if you take from Tamil Nadu's perspective, if you take from, Tamil Nadu politics, okay, here politicians or the people will justify that, India shouldn't have interfered, because it affected the, sentiments of its own people. India should have stepped behind and said, we will not interfere into this. So sometimes, reckless decisions, when we put our emotional intelligence behind, okay, then it compromises on the ethics or morality of, a country's. And it did have a huge implication on the internal politics. Rajiv Gandhi was massacred. So, when foreign policy is taken forward, when decisions are made under, moral grounds, when morality, see, that is where, you need to put your country first. You need to also understand the emotional intelligence of your country. How will this impact my own country? How will this, impact the security of my own people? And if it is going to compromise the morality of your own state or your own country, then you need to think on the decisions that you're making on the grounds of, policies.
Yes, next question. Next question. Come on, be quick. I think all the queries have been raised and you have answered them to the full satisfaction of the interns. I would just like to add one thing
Yes, yes.
to this discussion. India's policy of non-alignment has been misunderstood. And we thought that we are non-aligned, we will not be part of any military bloc. But Nehru realized it, that just to be on moralistic ground is not sufficient. And that's why he said after 1962 that we have been living in a fool's paradise. Why? Because non-alignment does not mean that we should not prepare militarily.
Yes.
Non-alignment does not